And Mr. Vice Chair, we are ready to go when you are.
I'd like to call a meeting to order. This meeting is being held in the council chambers and open for public attendance and participation. Can I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Brookman,
Here.
Commissioner McFarland,
Here.
Commissioner Joel,
Here.
Commissioner Blankenship,
Here.
Commissioner Sluter,
Here.
County Liaison Campbell.
Thank you. Next, we have the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Sluter, would you please lead us in the pledge?
Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Public communication. You are welcome and encouraged to participate in this meeting. Public comment on items not listed on the agenda will be heard at this time. Comments on controversial items may be limited and large groups are encouraged to select representatives to express the opinions of the group. Written request. Members of the public submitting written requests at least 24 hours prior to the meeting will be normally allotted 5 minutes to speak. Do we have any written requests?
There were no written requests.
Thank you. Appearance of interested citizens. Members of the public may address the Planning Commission on items of interest that are within the city's jurisdiction. Individuals addressing general comments are encouraged to limit their statements to 3 minutes. Do we have any comments from the public? I see no comments. Planning Commission business, agenda modifications. Do we have any commissioners or staff interested in modifying the agenda?
So, Mr. Vice Chairman, yes, we do have one item to bring up. We inadvertently omitted an item we'd like to add, and that is establishing a special meeting of the Planning Commission to occur on August 27th. This is the day of your regular meeting. It would be at 5 p.m. So the special meeting would occur from 5 to 6, and then your regular meeting would occur at 6 p.m.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve that agenda modification?
So move.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it.
Now, as clarification, was that to actually set the special meeting, or was that just to?
That was to set the special meeting. Correct.
Thank you.
Item 2, election of 2025 Planning Commission Chairperson and Vice Chairperson per Section E1 of the Planning Commission bylaws. Open up the item of the commissioners for discussion and recommendation of chair and vice chair, then conduct a vote to elect the 2025 Planning Commission Chairperson and Vice Chairperson. So, I request a motion to approve so what do we do at this point in time? I guess is what I'm asking you now.
So at this point, we would need a nomination by a commissioner and a second for someone to be the chairperson for the rest of this calendar year.
I move to elect Commissioner Brookman as the
Chairperson?
chairperson.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Now we need to move on for a motion for a vice chair. I'm going to make a motion for Commissioner Joel. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to agenda item 3, Planning Commissioners Workshop presented by PlaceWorks. Presentation by Mark Tig with PlaceWorks.
So I will just get us started. So we're doing this training just because we have 4 new commissioners as a result of the transition from at-large to district-based planning commissioners. Mark Teague and I go back a long ways. Mark, we've actually known each other for 25 years, and so we've worked each other off and on. And so Mark is very engaging, entertaining. He speaks regularly at planning conferences, also the League of California Cities. He is a wealth of knowledge, very down to earth, and very well spoken. So I just thank Mark for taking the time, for being willing to come up. PlaceWorks, just so you know, helped the city update its housing element, has helped us update and create our 2040 general plan. They're going to be helping us on updating our 33-year-old Central City specific plan, and we're about to embark on our zoning code update. So PlaceWorks knows the city very well, and so we're very lucky to have him with us. So with that, I would turn it over to Mark.
Well, thank you for those kind words, Doug. We do go back a long way. Both of us had less gray hair then. A couple of ground rules for this evening's work. First of all, I'm not talking at you. I'm not going to read the PowerPoint slides to you. All of the PowerPoint presentation that I have this evening will be available to you. There are copious notes at the bottom of them. Don't feel compelled to follow along. If you have a question, stop me. We'll get right into that question right away. This evening, you have your director and myself, nearly 100 years of planning experience that you can tap into and ask questions. There are no silly questions. There are no stupid questions. Trust me, I have 5 kids. I have heard everything. So at this point, I just want you to feel comfortable interrupting me. Hey, Mark, I have a question about X. I don't even care what X is. We'll try to answer it for you. If I use an acronym or a phrase or a term that you don't understand or that I haven't explained, call me on it. I once worked for a retired Marine colonel who hated acronyms with a passion and would stop me at every presentation. So I'm used to it. Jingoism gets into every single profession, and it screws up communication. So if you don't understand it, the public's not going to understand it. My goal here this evening is to give you some of the basics as it comes to planning. I do versions of this presentation throughout the state, multiple commissions. I do it at the League of California Cities. I say the same thing there. Every now and then I get called on it. So we're going to go a little bit of overview of what your tools are as planning commissioners. We're going to talk through the types of things that you get to deal with. We're going to have a little fun, usually at the government's expense, and we're going to talk through some solutions that you might have open to you. First of all, I'd like to thank you to be planning commissioners. It is the unsung hardest job in a city. All of the folks coming through that door that don't like what's going on are going to take it out on you. Now, fortunately, you get paid really well for that, and it'll show up in your bank account. Obviously, that's not true. But at the end of the day, you are the first line, and often folks coming through that door may not be angry at you, may not even be angry at the project, but they're passionate about where they live. And if they weren't passionate, they wouldn't live here. It's a good thing for people to care about their community, and it's a good thing. And so what you'll have to do, and what I'll give you some tips to do this evening, is you're going to have to sift through some of that emotion to find out what the real issue is. Sometimes those issues have nothing to do with planning, but you'll have staff here that you could direct people to help them. We're going to talk about general plans and zoning. We're going to talk about standards. We're going to talk about the role of the council. We're going to talk about the role of staff. We're going to go through how projects are reviewed on paper. We're going to talk about how projects are reviewed in real life. And at the end, because I like to keep the very best of things at the end, we're going to talk about the California Environmental Quality Act. Yes, CEQA. CEQA is Latin for Delays Project, and you're going to become very familiar with CEQA as your term on the Planning Commission goes through. You'll hear all sorts of terms. I will try to clarify what those are. I'll show you how to read an EIR. I'll give you some tips on what to look for. And at the end of this evening, I'm hoping you'll feel, hey, I got this. This is not as daunting as I had feared. And that's really our goal here this evening. So let's talk about the legal basis. Everything that you're dealing with deals with property rights. You know, you might have heard those. They're in the Constitution. You can deal with them. Government has to have a purpose for messing with those property rights. I happen to be a big, firm believer in that. And so when I write code, when I'm writing general plans, I'm thinking about what is the governmental purpose here? What are we trying to accomplish? We're not just messing with people's property because it's fun and we like to get people angry. We have a governmental purpose behind it. These are some of the laws that we have to comply with. You'll see National Environmental Policy Act, all the state laws there. By and large, all of that boils down to a really local set of regulations, led at the very top of the pyramid by the general plan. Then we talk about specific plans, zoning ordinances, but if you imagine this as a pyramid, the general plan is at the very top of things, and it governs everything that you have to deal with. It's important if you read one document while you're a planning commissioner, read the general plan. Make sure you've got some coffee or tea nearby because it's not the most invigorating of documents. But at the end of the day, there are goals and policies in your plan that you're going to wrestle with, because I will tell you that no matter how well the plan is done, no matter how much work has gone into it, somebody's going to come in with a project that doesn't fit neatly into that plan. Your job as commissioners will be to interpret the plan to see whether the project fits in your community. I like to put quotes in what we do as a profession because often we're so busy with our heads down at a document, we're trying to figure out what's going on for the moment of the day. In reality, what we're doing is pretty impressive. We've gathered together, we've purchased land, we live in a community, we have churches and schools, we worship together, we work together, we play together. It's important to remember that the people in this community, you're going to see them. It's one of the reasons consultants are popular, because you can yell at me, I go home. It's hard to yell at somebody at the podium or for them to yell at you, because you're going to see them at the soccer field, the grocery store, the library the next day. Keep in mind that you're all working toward the same goal and that you need to be able to have those conversations in public. I happen to think planning commission meetings are a great deal more fun than council meetings. They're always so stuffy. They're always, planning commissions are fun. People should want to come and talk to you because you're dealing with things that they enjoy, parks and schools and playgrounds. You're dealing with the types of things that affect the quality of life that they have in this community. You should be approachable. Councils tend not to be as approachable because they're always worried about budget and staffing and other things. You guys get to focus on the physical community, and you get to ask some questions like, why are you doing this? Where is this going? Those types of things come from the commission. So we talked about it. General plan and all of these are based in state law. There's a provision of the state law called the Government Code. Read it if you wish. I'll talk about it here momentarily. But everything stems, your police powers, your ability to control land use comes from the state constitution as given to us by state law. So what I would recommend is if you're ever curious about certain things, go to the law. Always go to the law. Then you can read all the attorneys' opinions, and there's many opinions by many attorneys. Read the law first, and I'll show you why some of that's a little complex. Zoning implements the general plan. So the general plan talks in broad terms about glowing things that may or may not ever actually come to pass. Zoning deals with people's specific property rights. You can put a building here or not here. It can be this tall. It can cover this much of the land. Those are all standards worked out within their zoning code based on the general plan. Zoning is where most people have difficulty with the city because you're telling them what to do. One of the most common things that we deal with in the zoning realm are fence heights. People get all excited about how high the fence can be or where the fence can be. Ironically, we usually don't care as long as it's safe, but there are provisions in there. You'll need to familiarize yourself with the code. The reason you don't have to read the whole code, although brownie points if you do, is that your staff will tell you in the staff report what provisions of the code apply to what parts of the project. And at that point, you can look it up. It's all online, it's all accessible, it's all there for you to read, but your staff will highlight what's going on there. A specific plan bridges the general plan and zoning. In some cases, they can be adopted as their own zoning, and in some cases, they're just an idea. And then we have other things that we'll talk about as we go on. So here's your general plan. This is a clip out of your general plan map. Those colors represent something called land use designations, which means it is a hope for what should occur on that property. May or may not actually be there, but it is a hope for what will be on the property. It is the first thing that a developer or a property owner will look at if they're trying to develop a piece of land. Because whatever you do, and you'll hear this a lot, is that you must be consistent with the general plan. You can't do something if it's red on here and somebody wants to do something that's blue. It's generally not possible without changing the plan. General plans look out over the horizon. We're interested in what's going to happen in 10, 15, 30 years. We tend not to stumble on our feet for those things. We're trying to create change. We're trying to guide the development. I will tell you that thanks to our friends just down the road in Sacramento, general plans are becoming less general. And you're starting to see certain specifications creep into the general plan. It's annoying as get out to the rest of us who actually enjoyed the planning process. There should be a place for you to dream. If you want a large park, you should be able to dream about it. If you want a certain type of development, you should be able to establish that. To a certain extent, Sacramento is trying to take a little bit of that away from you. I personally would rebel against that, but that's just me. Your general plan has a vision. This is the vision out of your general plan. And when I first started this profession, I could have given a tinker's toot about a vision. What does that help me on my daily job? I need to know what the setbacks are, the building height, the land coverage. I need to know what the road widths are. A vision helps you consider those things that don't fit neatly into that plan. It gives you an opportunity to coalesce all of the community input that may have been received to update that plan. What do we want our city to be? And it's in that vision. So when somebody's standing there saying, I want to put in a 9 million square foot logistics warehouse and I want to put it next to this neighborhood, does that meet your vision? Was that something that you anticipated? Are the impacts from that development going to affect my neighbors greatly? Those are things that you'll have to weigh because on your desk is where they start. General plan has goals. They're overarching. They may not be achievable. My goal was for my kids to take the trash out without being told once. Hasn't happened yet. The youngest is 30 years old. Presumably they're doing it on their own now, but it never happened. It's okay to have a goal that's outside your reach. I would argue that your goals should all be outside the reach. You should have something to strive for that is awesome. These are goals out of your plan. There are many, many more where these come from. Again, a little nighttime reading. If you're having trouble sleeping, read the general plan. It will do you in good stead because you'll see some of these quotations. You will hear consistency statements in staff reports. But some of these create livable neighborhoods. You can't do that as a commissioner. But what you can do is look at the design components of that neighborhood. Can people walk around? Can they visit? One of the most annoying things I've seen, I've done work in a city called Rancho Cucamonga. They have this beautiful subdivision. And so Susan lives in the subdivision. And she wants to play with Beth, who's in the adjacent subdivision, who, if you stood on Susan's roof, you could see Beth's house, but she has to get into a car because nobody thought to connect the neighborhoods with a sidewalk, or nobody thought to have it go through. All the realtors got all excited about cul-de-sacs and how much more they could charge. Nobody thought to think that Susan and Beth might be classmates and want to get together and do some homework or bake cookies or do whatever kids do nowadays. And now you have to get mom or dad to get in the car and drive them out onto busy streets. That's the sort of thing that your staff will bring to you and say, we want to connect this is what we're going to do. And the developer will stand there and say, well, I don't want to really do that because I have no really good reason. You have goals in your plans that will allow you to say, wait a minute, as a livable neighborhood, I want Beth and Susan to be able to get together with Joey and John and whoever else is out there because it's important for them to be able to walk around, ride their bikes without bugging me while I'm working on the motor in my garage. The state requirements upon which all of this is based, they all started in 65,300 of the government code. This is the entire paragraph for the land use element. This is all there is. You have to have something that designates those colors I showed you on the map and allows you to put those forth so people have an idea of what's going to happen. That's the entire government code section for the land use element. This, and it's only one page of it, is for the housing element. And heaven help me, it is the most useless element that we have. But it's also the only one that is mandated by the state, and it has lost its way. I might have a few opinions that I will share with you. I just want you to know and be aware. The housing element has to be updated every 8 years. There's something called the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, which means we have to demonstrate a certain number of homes can be built within our community. It is the only element of the general plan, I'll use an asterisk there, other than the safety element, that is approved by the state. Some safety elements have to go to the state. Too complicated for what we're doing this evening, but this is the big one. When I first started planning, this was the first project I ever did as an intern, believe it or not. And housing element took me a month, was approved within 6 weeks, and adopted 2 weeks after that. Nowadays, it's a 3-year process, often runs to several $100,000, and quite frankly, is annoying. You will see some of the issues with the housing element, but you can see how changes in state law end up affecting what we have to do in the city. I bring it up just so you can see that things are a little more complex behind the curtain before they get to your desk. These are the general plan elements from your general plan. There are mandatory elements, but there's no rules on this. You can combine any element with any other element as long as you cover the material that's in the state law. So we have a growth and economic development element. That's neat. I'd argue that your entire general plan should be an economic development for your city. You shouldn't just have one element, it should be all of them. But this is what you have to work with, and ultimately you can change this if you like. Land use, we talked about, divides the city into neat little colors. Community design, that's an interesting element because it speaks to the idea of what you want your community to look like. I would suggest to you that the community design element is worth your time because it deals with public realm. It deals with the streets and the areas next to the streets and how development interacts with those streets. Again, Susan and Beth need to be able to get to each other on a bicycle or a skateboard. That's on you for community design. There should be requirements in there that say, let's connect these subdivisions. Now, you also want to talk to the police department so somebody can't, steal your tools in one and skip to the other and make a quick getaway, but there are ways of dealing with that. Circulation really should be called mobility. This is a plan for how you move about in your community. The state would like you to not use your car. And then when I get done laughing, I say, well, that's neat, but it's 100 degrees outside, and I'm not going to Food for Less on my bicycle to get the week's groceries. What I prefer to refer to these things as providing mobility options. A lot of us have to get into our car, put on our armor, drive to our job, earn our daily bread, and come home. When I come home, I want the option. I don't want to have to drive. What if I can walk to the park? What if I can walk my kids to the ice cream parlor? What if I can walk to the library or ride my bike? It's an option. It's my choice. It's freedom of choice at that point, rather than mandating certain things. But you're going to see a lot of that within the circulation element. This is where Complete Streets lives. This means that when we put in a street, we also put in things for sidewalks and for bicycles. I didn't care a wet slap about ADA accessibility till I had kids, and I had to push a stroller. And I'm like, well, hey, that ramp's pretty handy. And then I had 2 of them in the stroller, and it got really handy. There are things that we do between signage and roadways and connectivity that matter to your community. And again, that's why it ends up on your desk. Public utilities, it's keeping your public works department happy. It's not a very glamorous part of the general plan, but let me tell you, providing sewer, water, maintaining streets and streetlights, and all of the things that Public Works does is a quality of life thing. And making sure that their needs are met when projects come before you is essential. Mess that up, you have an angry city engineer and a whole bunch of angry people, because when sewers back up, it's never pretty. Safety has become a new touchstone for the government, particularly on the heel of wildfires and some of the tragedies we've had in the North State and beyond. And this is an element, Doug, that now has to go to CAL FIRE in many cases to be the Board of Forestry to be approved, and lengthens the time that goes in there. But by and large, there's not much in the element other than to warn people about where these things could occur. Noise is an interesting one because there's bad noise, which happens to be a leaf blower. Hate leaf blowers. Pick up a rake. And then there's good noise. So bad noise is the stuff that you try to regulate or mitigate, reduce the impact of. Good noise means you have a great community. So for example, somebody playing music on Plymouth Street at 8:30 at night on a Friday, to me that's good noise, right? Play that same music at 11 o'clock in my neighborhood, you better run, because my wife is going to be angry. Differentiating between those two is essential, and there's the choices you're going to have to make. There's going to be people that want to do outside noise and have fun, and then there's going to be people that do this and annoy everybody. Balancing that, again, will end up on your desk. And then, of course, housing we just talked about. This is the one element that is lengthy and will frustrate you when you read it. The important part of the elements and everything that goes along with them is to link your ideas of a community to actual actions on the ground. Now, there's some things that you're going to discover as planning commissioners. First off, projects don't show up overnight, right? So when you get somebody standing here and you have a 200-unit subdivision, it's going to take a few years for that to happen. People don't understand that. And they will think that a 200-unit subdivision will show up next Tuesday after you've approved it on a Wednesday night. You'll have to talk them through and off that ledge. The other thing that you'll note is that change happens incrementally in most communities. You don't end up with massive plans that come in and change everything overnight. So a little bit each time is success and progress for your community. And then finally, if you don't like it, let's change the standards so nobody does that. And we'll talk a little bit how to do that. Zoning takes the general plan designations that were on that colorful map and gives you precision for those things. It says your lot size must be X. Your building can only be this tall. You have zoning tables that allow permitted and ministerial, or permitted uses and conditional uses, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But a ministerial land or permitted use means that they're allowed to do that. Our zoning code establishes a list of land uses that they're allowed to do. It's a property right. You can only take that away with certain due process requirements. A discretionary land use, something that requires a conditional use permit or some sort of permit, gives you the ability within certain legal parameters. People still have property rights. People still get due process. Yes, now you'll all be thinking, I don't know if this planning commissioner idea was a good thing. But as long as you provide due process, you can modify a project and you can make it fit within the ideals of your community. One of my favorites is Walmart's, back in the day when they were building Walmart's. I processed a number of them, as you know. And they had 3 designs. They had the community doesn't care, they just want the Walmart. They had the community cares a little bit, and they want you to make it look good, put some lipstick on that thing. And then they have, oh my goodness, they've hired a consultant, and we better give them the best design. And if you go up and down the state, you will see Walmarts with different designs on them. Not because it was that much more money for the government or for the applicant, but because the community made a stand. And they said, no, we're going to do it like this. Now, there's limits to that because you could also force the project to go someplace else. You have to make those trade-offs. But it is a negotiation, and there's almost always an ability to modify the project if it's discretionary. So when you're looking at your zoning code, and we're going to be doing an update of the zoning code, and we're working closely with you on that, you have to decide whether or not you are happy with the ministerial uses, because that means they're going to happen whether you like them or not. They'll simply go to Doug. Doug will say, oh, that's a permitted use. Here's your building permit. And the conditional uses. Drive-throughs. In some communities that I've worked in, Mount Shasta, we did an EIR for a drive-through. It was a Kentucky Fried Chicken Taco Bell. We did an EIR for the drive-through. Now keep in mind, the drive-through was not next to people's homes. The drive-through was next to the railroad line. The crossing for the railroad line was in front of the store. What they were concerned about, though, was that the noise from the drive-through would somehow affect people that didn't live there. It's Mount Shasta. They have a different way of looking at things. In other communities I work in, it's a ministerial permit at the counter. All you have to do is meet certain requirements. Every community is different. When you meet other commissioners and you get to compare codes and ordinances, you'll discover that yours are different than theirs. And that's okay. This is your city, your rules, your expectations. And it's okay to be that way. So here's the land use designation. It creates an expectation. The first thing I will tell you is I can color this whole map for commercial. Doesn't mean you're going to get them all. It just means they have an opportunity. The property owner can try to market it that. It determines the type of uses that are permitted there. So a land use would be a shop or homes or a park. Those types of things are considered land uses. And it's used for the zoning. So this is out of your actual general plan. And I like to pull these excerpts in so when you're reading it later, we'll go on. So a specific plan, and you have a couple of them in this community that Doug's trying to get rid of because, let's just say they've outlived their usefulness. Specific plan takes a small piece of your community and puts it under a magnifying glass. It allows you to look at that in excruciatingly cool detail. So for example, if you do a downtown specific plan, just throwing that out there, maybe you have different noise requirements. So you can have outdoor music and entertainment. Maybe you have different lighting requirements so that you can have people walking around in the evening. Because let's face it, in the summer around here, you want to walk along after the sun's gone down. But maybe you want some lighting and some music out while you're doing that. In a downtown specific plan, you might want more housing. One of the things planners have relearned is, and I know this is going to come as a shock to you, people spend money. Cars don't. And so we try to add people back into the downtown. Go figure. Many of the downtowns in the 40s and 50s, they took housing out of it. And so what happened at 5 o'clock? Ghost town. Nothing. So now what we're doing is we're putting people back into it. The police department calls that eyes on the street. Less mischief if there are people living there. It's also the heart of your community. Maybe you want more people there to own it and to be a part of it. There are other places where you don't want people. Industrial parks, probably don't want people living out there. So we'll have specific plans that get into the nitty-gritty. Now, a specific plan can just be an idea. Hey, we'd like this out here. We typically call those area plans because they skirt the state law for specific plans. But a specific plan can be adopted as an ordinance and serve as zoning, unique zoning for that site. They're probably the most fun you'll have as a planning commissioner with a larger project, is you'll be able to get into this and how this works. Ideally, and I'm working on a couple like this, once they're done here, everything becomes approved at the desk. They don't have to run through the gauntlet again. We don't have multiple public hearings on things that you've already decided. So this is a copy of your zoning map. It's not in crayon, but it might as well be. And this is where things get complicated for the landowner, because when they pull up their site, it's hard for them sometimes to understand what's required and what's allowed. The toughest time to work the counter in a planning department is the day after a 3-day weekend, because somebody's uncle talked to somebody's nephew and told them what happens in their city and then convinced them that can happen in their city, and then they come in and they find out that that doesn't work. Or they get online and they misread this in the best way possible. Some of the most wonderful conversations I've had at the counter have been trying to figure out what it is they actually wanted to do, because they'll come in telling me what kind of permit they want. One of the most popular ones is, I want to build a shed in my backyard. Big fan of sheds. It's where I do all my woodworking. But they'll come in and they'll have read the code and they'll believe that they're going to have to get a variance to put the shed in a certain spot. And I'll have to spend 15 minutes talking with them about what they actually want to do. And then I'll tell them, well, you could do all of those things or pivot. It's an accessory structure. If as long as it meets these criteria, you can put it in, doesn't require a building permit. And the light bulb goes off that maybe they should have talked to us first because that's the easiest route. You'll get a couple of those that come in. Zoning is hard. Zoning is often complicated. The most complicated zoning that we have out there is form-based. And I don't think I have a slide for that because we don't have any here. But form-based zoning is wonderful, but it's also the most complex zoning. Let's talk a little bit about ministerial versus discretionary projects. In fact, let me stop. Before your eyes glaze over, any questions? Been talking forever. You sure? Is this clear? Oh, yeah, it gets worse. So ministerial decisions have little personal judgment. This is defined out of state law. I didn't make these up. Discretionary requires exercise of judgment. These will become important later on when we're talking about CEQA or environmental analysis, because ministerial projects are not subject to CEQA. So remember that list of permitted uses? If it's on that list and it's ministerial, no CEQA is required. That blows people's minds. It can be on that list and be covered. The idea being that you've already addressed it elsewhere, and therefore it's consistent, and off we go. Discretionary actions are always covered for CEQA, and this is a fun one. It can be covered by CEQA and be exempt by CEQA at the same time. But I'll get into that in a minute. And if there's mixed decisions, you'll get some of that as well. It'll all show up here as a discretionary action. In most of the cases, I would say all of the cases, you'll never see a ministerial project unless something's gone horribly wrong and it gets appealed or something goofy's happened and it needs a planning commission interpretation. Your realm will be the discretionary projects. This is an excerpt out of your code. I just happened to grab it for the slide. You can see the uses on the far left: permitted, zoning clearance, use permit, and then specific standards. In some cases, we allow the use to be there as long as you do these things. It's an if-then type of thing, and people will come to the counter. For accessory buildings, I'm sure it's permitted provided it isn't this big or that tall or doesn't impede things. Churches are generally allowed in various many places. People wonder why they're not allowed everywhere. Parking. Just on Sundays or whenever the church is in session, parking is an issue because if you put it in a neighborhood, we have to allow for it. Sometimes they can work it out. Sometimes you can have shared parking, but the idea is that you have the ability to talk with people before they just go out and do certain things. Now the council, city council role, they sit atop the organizational structure in the city. They are the final arbiter of everything. Everybody works for the council. City manager works for the council. City attorney works for the council. Doug ultimately works for the council. So they sit up there. You guys serve at the pleasure of the council. They can be interesting. The relationship with your councilman can be interesting. I would suggest you check in regularly and make sure that you're on the same page. The council also hears appeals from this body. Now, in order for a planner to do their job relatively well, we have to predict with about 80% certainty what your decision is likely to be. Why? Because by the time somebody is standing there in front of you with a development to be pursued, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars may have been spent to stand there. We'll have done technical studies, design, engineering. There may have been a whole host of things that get improved. And if the commission's going to turn it down, wouldn't it be better to know that before they spent all that money? And so from a staff perspective, we're looking at what you do, how you do things, to say, well, you can certainly try it that way, but the last 3 times this went to the commission, they didn't like A, B, and C. So if you want to smooth through, maybe you do A, B, and C a little better. It's that kind of interaction with staff that helps the developer through the process, so that by the time the project gets to you, at least we've dealt with A, B, and C before you've seen it. The council will take a look at your actions, and they have what they call a de novo hearing, which means they can approve, deny, or approve with conditions. So it's like a brand new hearing, but they should take a look at what you're doing. If you find that your decisions are overruled by the council on a regular basis, several things come into play. One, it's time to change the law, because pretty clearly you're interpreting something one way and the council's interpreting another. Secondly, as soon as the development community finds out the planning commission is just overruled at the council level, you become irrelevant. Nobody's going to want to spend the time to make you happy at this meeting because it doesn't matter. So that's a real sign of a disconnect when the commission and the council are regularly at odds with each other. That's why I would suggest you periodically check in with the council, periodically review things to make sure you're going the right way. Because they're the elected officials. They're the ones that got elected to have those decisions. Your job is to help them move through. You still have more fun than they do, so there's that. The Planning Commission, this comes out of your municipal code. There are rules in your muni code for what you can and can't do. For example, being a planning commissioner doesn't get you a free coffee at Starbucks. Sorry. It doesn't get you pretty much anything except yelled at on a regular basis, stopped in the store to ask why something happened, all of those things. But there are powers that come directly from the council into the commission's purview, and that's what we'll take a look at. Check out what it says in your muni code. Some of them are lengthier than others. You can look at what other cities do as well. All that stuff is online, but it's not riveting reading. You pretty much have known everything by now. This is a fun one. You have staff. You have highly technical, professional staff. I was talking to Doug earlier. I was raised that as a staff member, you deserve my recommendation. You may not like it, but I have an opinion. And it's backed up by what's in the report so that you have something to work from. You know, I shouldn't be giving you a staff report that says, well, hell, I don't know either. You just guys figure it out, flip a coin, or what have you. But you deserve the benefit of our review. So the staff person will take a look at the general plan, our first check-in. Then we'll look at zoning. And then we'll start looking at other things. Does it fit within the engineering standards? Does it fit within the design standards that we have? And we will present that to you. And then you can take a look at it and you can agree or disagree. Those are all within your purview. Again, it's a discretionary project. That's why it's in front of you. And then at the end, you can say, yep, we agree with staff. This is something here. Or we don't like A, B, and C. So if you don't like the project, call the staff. If you have a question about the staff report, call staff. If you want to change something that's in the staff report, call your staff. Now, this doesn't mean you can't bring those same issues up at the public meeting. In fact, I implore you to do so. But if you don't talk to your staff, you won't get the answer at the meeting because they won't know. They'll be blindsided. So if you call them ahead of time, they can give you the answer then. And then when you ask the question at the meeting, we can give you the answer in public, right? It's one of the benefits you have as the commissioner. You're getting the materials ahead of the public, and you will be able to ask questions of staff at any point in the process, and then we'll be able to answer that. Probably the largest single takeaway from tonight is if you're curious or confused or unsure, call staff. It's our job to make this understandable to you, because as you gain experience, you will become more knowledgeable than the public. And if you're confused, I guarantee you the public will be confused. Please read the staff report. Now, the way I structure my staff reports is everything you need to know is usually on the first page. And that's because I was taught to write staff reports by an old school reporter who said most people will read the first page and beyond. Please never on the record say the following: I haven't had a chance to read the whole thing, but by golly, it's a good project. I'm going to approve it anyway. I've been asked to say that in front of planning commissioners by city attorneys for years now. If you haven't had a chance to read the whole thing, talk with your staff, find out what the key points are. Usually those are right in the front of the document and you can figure that out. If you need to continue an item because it's just a wealth of materials, talk with your staff. You're starting to see my point here. Talk with your staff. They're your friends in this. We're going to try to make sure you get things. This does not mean that it all happens at staff level. Certainly bring this stuff up. You can certainly hate the project. Staff will know that. Hey, Commissioner so-and-so is not going to like this project no matter what we do with it. Great. At least we can answer your questions at the meeting. And at that point, the public knows that we're all rowing in the same boat in the same direction. What looks really bad is when a lot of questions are asked of staff and we don't have the answers, and then the applicant can't get their project through. The public who's spent their time to come see you out of their busy day with soccer games and everything going on, they get dissatisfied because no decision is made because you didn't have the answer. That doesn't look cool, and it doesn't sound cool when it happens. So please, if you have questions, ask your staff, even if you don't like the project. And I would say, especially if you don't like the project. As a commission, you review the staff report. You have to do CEQA first, even though I've left it at the very last. We'll get to that in a second. Conduct the public hearing. Now, the public hearing is an interesting process. It allows people to come in and talk with you. If the room is packed, sometimes you might reduce the amount of time that they spend. You have rules and procedures for that. It's important that the conversation be between the person making the comments and the chair. Sorry, Commissioner, you got elected. They're going to yell at you. And the reason for that is they don't need to be yelling at people in the audience because the room starts to go into chaos. And they don't need to be yelling at staff because our job is to support you. You're the focus, and then the chair controls the room. You manage the meeting. Now, you can do that any number of ways. The best ways I've seen are with a sense of humor, sometimes self-deprecating humor, getting people to let off a little steam and sit down. If it gets really bad, call a recess. It's important that these be well-reasoned, logical, and polite conversations. Calling people names, using profanity, doesn't fit that. It's also a form of bullying. And one of the things that we like to do as planners is we like to elevate those quiet voices. There will be people in the room who are terrified to speak because of all the other people that may have a counter opinion. That's a form of bullying. We wouldn't tolerate it on the school ground. We shouldn't tolerate it in our public meetings. This should be a welcome place for everybody. One of my best stories on that, again, a Walmart story. They have the best stories. I'm doing the Walmart in Willows. I don't know if you've seen the Walmart there. We're doing a brand new Walmart. Room is packed. There must be 200 people in the room. The fire marshal's there worried about capacity. And it's a public hearing. And this lady stands up and says, I'm in favor of this project, but my husband is not. But he doesn't have to do the shopping for the kids. He doesn't have to do the shopping for the household. He doesn't have to do A, B, and C, and I'm tired of driving to Chico to make this happen. But he should say his own piece. And she sat down. Now, there's 200 people in this room looking at this poor guy who drops his hat down over his eyes, didn't say a word. The mayor, at that point, looks up and says, I think we've just found the smartest man in the room right there. The point is, everybody should be free to speak. That's one of the benefits of this country, for heaven's sakes. We should stand on that. And if people are bullying others in your room, it's incumbent upon you to take care of that. The last thing, and I hate doing this, and I never had to do this when I first started, safety first. Everybody goes home, right? We don't tolerate anybody threatening anybody else in a room. It's simply not tolerated. I've instructed my staff, if they feel personally threatened, to simply leave. And it's unfortunate we have to say that in this day and age. And I doubt it would ever happen here, but it's just something you have to think about because you have to read the room and see what's going on. After the public hearing is closed, Everybody said their piece. They said how wonderful you are. Then the commission gets to discuss the item. Now, it all depends on how you want to run the meeting. You can ask questions. Some cities get really wrapped around the axle. Well, they've closed the public hearing. They can't ask a question. We're not that formal of a city. If you need to ask a question of the applicant or somebody else, there should be a way to do that, get that information. But I've been at cities where, by golly, if you haven't said your piece, you can't say squat, which tends to annoy the audience because who's that formal? And there's usually one of three outcomes. You can approve or recommend approval. Now, when you approve, that means that your approval authority, as set by the ordinance, stops at the Planning Commission. Those would be things like use permits and the like. Usually stops here. Other stuff that's legislative in nature, general plan amendments, zoning changes, you would be the recommending body to the council. Doesn't matter, it's an action. If the authority to approve comes with the ability to condition as well. And that includes zoning, which tends to annoy city attorneys. But if you can approve it, you can approve it with conditions. If you're going to continue an item, please, for all that is holy, let staff know ahead of time and let us know why. Because one of the things that government gets fairly criticized for is essentially delaying things and not making a decision. You were appointed to make decisions. If you need additional information to make that decision, the first thing you should do is call staff and see if we can have it at the meeting. And if we can't, then that seems to be a legitimate reason if it's important to your decision to have a continuance. A couple of things about continuances. Continuing to the next meeting often doesn't work because agendas have to be done usually a week or two before your meeting. So that gives us about 5 working days to fix something. If it's small, your staff will tell you. But sometimes if you have to continue it and we actually have to do some work to make that happen, you might have to continue it out for a month or two. That's something you work out with staff depending on what it is that you need to make that decision. And then lastly, and this is an underused piece of action by many communities, you can deny a project. Yes, you can say no. Even if there's expensive people standing here in fancy suits, if it doesn't fit in your community, you can say no. Can you be appealed? Sure. But if it doesn't meet your standards as expressed in the general plan and in the zoning code, it's fine to say no. Now, the only thing I would say to that is, if you remember I said I have to be able to predict with about 80% accuracy, tell me why. What is it you're not happy with? Can they change that and come back and talk to you, right? There's a little bit of discussion that goes on there. Why are you unhappy with this? Staff report will usually have findings for our recommendation. Now, years ago, there was a trend where we would have findings for approval and findings for denial, and I don't think anybody does that anymore because it seems a little illogical. Well, I've just spent an entire staff report telling you how to approve the project, and now I'm going to spend this last 3 pages telling you how to deny the project. Doesn't make a lot of sense. But if you're going to deny a project and it's a big enough project and you want to make findings for that, staff can work with you on how that actually happens, because there do need to be something in the record explaining why you have made denial. Findings we talked about. The findings in the staff report are our draft. Feel free to add to them. Feel free to recommend additions to the findings. If you think of something, hey, blah, 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 this also does this. That's awesome. The more findings, the better. The findings are based on what's in your code for how things are supposed to be reviewed. It's a statement to the public of why you made the decision. In court cases, particularly in environmental court cases, there's a phrase called show your work. We've all heard it in school. You can't just put the answer there. You have to show how you got there. This is the same thing, only it's for your decision. This is particularly important for denials or something that's going to be a radical shift from what may have been improved. They're not complicated. They can be a single sentence. They should be factual, however, right? Don't make things up. Make sure it's factual because it's easy to have that stuff challenged. This is an example out of your code for the findings for a conditional use permit. Pretty basic. The use fits here. There can be other findings that come under these. the site design is adequate. Some of these are outdated depending on the type of development. We'll have to do that when we update the code because the state has taken away your ability to say no for certain types of projects. We'll fix that in the code and come back and talk to you about it. You have floodplain management. I mean, some of this stuff is pretty self-explanatory. Talk a little bit about variances because this gets thrown out a lot. A variance is special permission to not follow the zoning code in some parameter. Variances should be difficult to come by. They should be almost impossible to approve, and they should be a rarity on your desk. They are a special grant of privilege that should be based on the physical characteristics of the site. So things happen. Maybe it's a triangular piece of property and it's unbuildable unless we allow some change in how the standards go. Maybe whatever. There's too much slope or there's wetlands on it or something. If we allow a tweak to the code, that will work. What it should never be is, well, I couldn't design a house for that site. Oh, really? Why don't you try? Because just allowing a variance because your standard house wouldn't work there isn't going to get us to go over our code or to kill our code. So variances should be tough. It's in state law. It's one of the few things that is in state law. It's also in your code section. It's right there. We talked a little bit about this as we've gone through here. How are projects reviewed? Staff first looks at the general plan. We look at standards. We ask a great deal of questions of the applicant because we know you're going to have questions and we try to put those answers in there. When you're looking at it, it's okay to disagree with the staff report. Everybody understand that? As good as Doug and his team is, you may not like some of the stuff they come to you with. May not. Doesn't mean they're bad. Doesn't mean you're bad. It just means that you have a difference of opinion. And for whatever reason in this country, we seem to have forgotten that you can have a difference of opinion and still be friends. I'm a Niner fan. I have friends that like the Raiders. I don't get it, but we both watch football. So at the end of the day, it's okay to disagree. Call the staff. It's your decision. I think I really want to hammer that point home. It is your decision, not staff's. We're recommending you look at it. If you agree, great. And most of the time you will. But if you don't agree, that's also okay. You have permission. I've talked to commissioners like, well, I'm just rubber stamping what staff said. Time for you to get off the commission. You don't understand your role here. Treat every project equally. Now I'm going to say this, and it's probably going to offend people. I don't care how long they lived in the community. I don't care if it was your favorite second grade teacher. I don't care if she makes the best oatmeal raisin cookies. You write down the conditions of approval and treat her like she's the nastiest, meanest developer you've ever run into. Why? Because right after that entitlement is granted by this body, that person may sell that project, sell that entitlement, because land use entitlements run with the land. They don't run with a person. They may sell that, and now you've got to deal with somebody who's going to look at every word that you said. Well, you didn't say we did this. It wasn't written down. If it matters to you, it gets written down. Can't overemphasize that enough. Because otherwise it's just verbal, and we all know that's not worth the paper it's written on. Lean on your general plan and city standards. If it's not in there, it's time to change them. General plans can be changed 4 times a year. You can change them as many times as you want during each of those 4 times. So you can update the whole thing 4 times a year if you were so inclined. If the standard's not there and you're not happy with it, fix it. Work with Doug to fix it. Some of that stuff takes more budget, has to be worked through the council, but you can change these things. Look at that. Don't just change things because you don't like the project. And don't do it in a vacuum. If you're going to change a standard in community that's been around for a while, maybe you should tell people and have a couple of meetings about it. The Planning Commission is a great place for those things to happen because you have the ability to have a conversation, ideally without a project in front of you. If a project is before you for consideration, it's not the time to be talking about standards. They've met the standards, they've brought them to you, they did what you asked them to do. If you change it now, that's kind of unfair. Beware of unintended consequences. Now, I'm of two minds of this. Sometimes ordinances get adopted to prevent something that will never happen again from happening again. And they just end up in there and nobody bothers to go through and comb through them. In my perfect world, to adopt a new regulation, you have to take 2 off. But again, I'm not a big fan of some of this stuff. So take a look at it. Think about the unintended consequences. It's why you do it as a committee or as a group. Have people look into it. Unintended consequences can be ugly to deal with after the fact. If you don't like the project, make sure it's not just the person you don't like. There are some really obnoxious developers and applicants, the kind that can annoy you with good morning. But look at the project within the context of your general plan and your expectations in the community. I don't care how caustic or annoying they are. If it's a good project, you should approve it. And if you don't like the project and you're going to deny it, it'd be nice if you're clear on the reasons. And please don't let it be that I didn't like the suit he was wearing. Right? That's not a reason to deny a project. Now let's talk about the environmental process. Now, as I mentioned, CEQA means delayed project. And often the CEQA process has to get started well before you see the project. And it has to get started that way because things only grow during certain seasons. It takes a while to develop some studies. Those things are all essential. So we'll be giving you information, and that's all it is information. An environmental document should never tell you how to approve a project. Should never tell you to deny a project. In fact, the environmental process as enumerated in California state law is specifically designed to allow you to make a decision. All it's trying to do is say, if you make this decision, these consequences may occur. And if you're okay with the consequences and you've done the public process right, you can make that decision. So CEQA does not kill projects. EIRs do not kill projects, much to the dismay of people that demand them. EIRs give you a pathway to approve a project anyway. That's how it's designed. There are 2 types of CEQA documents, and they fall under 2 challenge criteria. One is substantial evidence, and the other is fair argument. Substantial evidence is the gold standard here. It is the one that everybody's clamoring for. It means that in order to challenge my study, you have to do your own study. Fair argument means I just disagree with you. And so you can see that on the fair argument side of things, if somebody just disagrees with the conclusions of the environmental study, the judge looks over their glasses at them and says, go do an EIR. And that's how low that threshold is. Negative declarations, or neg decs as we call them, pretty much dying out for controversial projects. We still use them occasionally, but there are other better tools now that fall in the substantial evidence category. Your staff will tell you what those tools are when you have the report. All you need to know as a commissioner is this is the first action you take. Because if you can't approve the environmental document, none of the rest of it matters. You can't approve the project and then go fix the EIR. Nope, you have to do everything CEQA first, then the project. And it'll be set up that way in your staff report. Exemptions, now this is where it's interesting. You see the little quote there? Once a lead agency has determined that an activity is a project subject to CEQA, a lead agency shall, and I have that in bold on purpose, determine whether the project is exempt from CEQA. Yep, this is our best and brightest writing this crap. At the end of it all, the issue here is this. You are required to look for an exemption before you move on. And this was hammered home in San Diego this last year, where the Board of Supervisors was trying to override the Planning Commission. So The project was an industrial project in an industrial area, and it was consistent with the county's general plan that they had just done, consistent with the EIR that was done for the county's general plan. And the applicant said, hey, I'm consistent. I qualify for a section 15183 exemption. And the staff said, oh yeah, huh? It is kinda. Okay. So everybody came to the planning commission and they had, pitchforks and the various, I'm anti-everything. At the planning commission, the planning commission said, well, it's industrial in the general plan. It's been industrial for a decade. They're doing industrial. Yeah. So then they went to the Board of Supervisors appealing the planning commission's decision. And the board looked in the room, all the pitchforks and the burning effigies and whatnot, and said, oh, you know what? I think we really do need an EIR. The applicant sued. The court said, oh no, you have substantial evidence suggesting that this exemption was adequate. You shall do an exemption. The wording is not optional. You do not have the ability to just willy-nilly require things. So exemptions are powerful. Exemptions are also, if you remember remember this table under the substantial evidence side of things. That's how powerful they are. I propose to you that if it qualifies as a neg deck, it probably qualifies as an exemption, and somebody's just not having the courage to tell you. Okay, let's talk about thresholds. When we look at an environmental impact, we are looking at a threshold of significance. That means we're taking a look at the impacts. We've established in our community this and no further shall we go. We've established a line in the sand, a pink line, if you will. If the project will have something above that line, we call it a significant impact. And that gives you an authority at that point to establish a condition of approval that we call a mitigation measure to mitigate that impact. And if we're fortunate, we're being able to mitigate it below that line. We're mitigating to that line. 0 isn't the target. Mitigating to the threshold of significance is the target. If it's below that line, then we can adopt a mitigated negative declaration. If it remains above that line, you're obligated to do an EIR. Now, I tell you this because this all happens at the staff level. And we can usually look at a project and go, that's an EIR or it's not. But I wanted you to understand that your mitigation measures don't get to 0. Mitigation measures also don't solve existing problems. If the street's already messed up, if this is already a problem, that's on the city. It's not on the applicant. Again, it's a fairness doctrine for the applicant. You can't require the last guy in to fix all the problems that you've ignored all the way along the way. Mitigation measures do not give you any new powers. Now, this is a fun one because I've had arguments with planning directors on this recently. If you don't have the ability to establish it as a condition of approval, you have no jurisdiction. You cannot require it. This raises some interesting things. If you're doing a project on a Caltrans facility, you have no jurisdiction. So even if you had all the money to fix the problem that is raised by this project, you cannot require it because you don't own the land, you have no jurisdiction over it. You have to be able to enforce the mitigation measure. So mitigation measures should always be measurable. If anybody stands here and says, well, we're going to teach a bunch of people who run a backhoe what cultural resources look like, and that mitigates something, it does not. Nobody can measure that. If, on the other hand, you're going to say, we're going to put in 3 speed bumps here, here, and here, and a new stop sign, anybody, including my wife, can go out and see the 3 speed bumps and the stop sign. If it isn't measurable, it doesn't happen. It also needs to be linked to a specific impact. You can't just make up stuff. So there should be a finding of significance on an impact that you're addressing with that mitigation measure. So these are carefully crafted. All mitigation measures are conditions of approval. Please don't change them without talking to your staff because it could upset the apple cart all the way all over. We can add other conditions of approval because remember, it's a discretionary action, so we're working on, but there we are. We'll talk a little bit about CEQA streamlining, only because you're going to hear about it. If you talk to other planning commissioners, you're going to read about it in all the publications you get from the league. What this really means is you're eliminating people from the process. I realize just saying that I don't mean that you're cutting them in half and eliminating them. I mean that the public review process for CEQA is eliminated through the streamlining. Because it has been determined by the powers that be that people are the problem with CEQA. I personally disagree with that wholeheartedly. I think there needs to be better job curbing how and when people communicate their issues on environmental. But that's really what CEQA streamlining means. It means we're going to an exemption or we're going to some other mechanism that doesn't require you to ask the public what they think. I want you to pause on that a little bit as a commissioner. That doesn't seem to be in line with small town realities. You want to hear what people have to think. You may not like it, but you're going to want to hear. So be a little bit aware about some of the CEQA streamlining that comes down from on high, because it may be taking people that you want to hear from out of the process. As I mentioned, the environmental process is specifically designed to allow you to approve a project. So if we can't mitigate, remember to that standard, if we can't get there, what happens? Well, we have to do an environmental impact report, an EIR. We have to look at all the feasible ways of addressing the issue. And then we can do a statement of overriding considerations. An EIR is the only vehicle that allows you to do that. That allows you to sit here and say, we're going to do all these things and we don't care, we're going to approve the project anyway. A statement of overriding considerations is a reason for approving the project, even if there's an impact that you cannot mitigate. Your staff will work on most of this with you. A lot of this comes from the attorneys, is what they feel. This sort of transitions from the public-facing document to the first legal challenge that could happen on the project. But the idea here, much like your findings, is to tell people, yes, we're going to fill this wetland, but we're also building a senior center, and we want the senior center. And here's why. Those are acceptable reasons for doing those things. So at the end of the day, a statement of overriding consideration, only done with an EIR, highly technical. You'll have to look at them. It's a bizarre part of the process, but it does allow you to take action on the project. Remember, the environmental process is not to stop you from acting. It's to give you the information for acting. I used to give an entire session on this, and I'm going to cut it down really briefly because nobody needs to listen to me this long. You're going to get an EIR. It's about, let's see, the EIR I'm talking to you about is 7,000 pages currently and climbing. You're going to get a big document. Now, if there's any justice in the world, it'll be electronic and you won't have to carry around, 5 reams of paper. I'm going to tell you what to read first. So the environmental process is interesting. We start with a notice of preparation, and then we do something called a draft EIR, which we circulate to the public. And then we do a bunch of technical studies to support that draft EIR. And then after it's circulated to the public, we get a lot of comments. That's called the final EIR. So the final EIR is the notice of preparation, the draft EIR, all of the technical appendices, all of the comments, and all of the response to comments. So that's an EIR in a nutshell. Do not open it up to page 1 and start reading. Skip all that. Presumably you know what the project is. You've read the notice. Oh, it's a Costco. Pick on Costco. Go to the final EIR. The final EIR and the errata, which is usually the first document in your staff report because everything else is older, it will have all of the people annoyed at your project. And they will have spent a lot of time telling you how bad this EIR is and how stupid you are for even thinking about approving the project. And then it's going to have, as part of that, your staff or your consultant or whomever's response to those comments. So you have a little debate going on here. Your EIR sucks because of X. We think you're wrong because of Y, right? Sometimes there are attorneys that are paid a lot of money per hour to provide those letters. All in the final EIR, all part of the public record, all of it. So read that, read the comments, the response to those comments, and then the findings. Now, the findings are essentially the EIR without the pictures. So it's going to go through and say, here's the impact, here's the solution, here's what happens after we've solved the problem. With that, you can cover an EIR of almost any length in about 2 hours and be probably more knowledgeable than most of the people presenting on the document at that time. Then you can look at the staff report because it'll have the recommendation. The staff will have picked out key items. You can skim the introduction. You can skim the setting. You live here. You know where it is. You can skim methodology and thresholds. And then you can just pick and choose where you want to be with that. So that will save your life when Douglas gives you, that much paper on an EIR. And you can share that with your other planning commissioner friends. Now, if you want to read the thing cover to cover, that's great. But it's not a novel. There's no plot. It's not very interesting. It's very repetitive. And honestly, this will get you everything you need to know to go through the hearing. I'd like to include this slide at the very end because you're all pretty tech savvy. You can click on these links. There's a lot of information here. The one in particular that I'd like to draw your attention to is at the very bottom left-hand side. It's the Planning Commissioner's Handbook. I'm kind of proud of that because I participated in building it. I participated in making sure it's as objective as I could get it, because I think you get fed a lot of nonsense through some of these publications, and I wanted you to be able to know what the law required and what best practices were within that context without a lot of it. So all of this is accessible. There's a lot of other things on here that you can go to get additional information. And of course, as I've been a broken record all evening, if you have any questions, call your staff. So here's another hit on the planning commissioners. It's got everything you need to know in it. Some of you that have been a planning commissioner for a while may have remembered the old binder. I don't know if you remember the old binder. We did away with all that. It's all online. You can search it. It's all accessible. There's some really cool links to other things now. Gutenberg is done and we're on to the digital age now. So, all right, I've blathered on for an hour or so. Questions?
Any questions? Looks like none. Thank you for your presentation.
You said this is going to be available. Is it on the planning side, or is it, or would we?
And we can circulate this out to the Planning Commission so you could have it and have those links where you can click on at your pleasure.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
All right. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, future agenda items. Jaspreet.
All right. So for future agenda items, as we voted on earlier this evening, we will have our special meeting at 5 p.m. on August 27th. So the first hour will be trading with our city attorney, John Fox, followed by our regular meeting at 6 p.m. And the item for consideration is going to be a development plan for Merriment Village on Walton Avenue, which consists of 218 affordable units, and this has been approved previously, but they did request to come back to the city to have a different CEQA determination. So that will be presented on August 27th. And then for our September meetings, we are going to cancel the September 10th Planning Commission meeting, but we will meet on September 24th. And a little bit more going on that evening. So the first one is going to be a tentative subdivision map, which is our Elmer West for 53 single-family lots located on the west side of Elmer Road, which is adjacent to Thiara Estates. That was just recently annexed into the city. So this is just on the west side of Elmer, and so 53 new single-family lots. We will also have another tentative subdivision map, and that is known as the Ridge Estates, located off of west of El Margarita for 139 new single-family lots. And we also will have an ADU ordinance update. So the city had updated the ADU ordinance, but HCD has come back and requested additional updates, and the ADU law changes all the time. So really, we're just going to update that to meet the new state code. So that's what we have coming up.
Question on the El Margarita one, is that going to be north of 20 or south of 20?
It is south.
Really, like across from the high school, or?
Yes.
Oh, no kidding. All righty, thank you. Next, we have, lost my place here, I believe, Development Services Director report, Mr. Doug Libby.
Yes, sir. Well, I will keep this brief. I just wanted to say congratulations, Mr. Chairman and Vice Chair. Welcome to all of our commissioners. Thank you for being here tonight for this training. As Jaspreet noted, we'll have a training focus on the legal side of things with the City Attorney's Office on the 27th. Yeah, so just know that staff is here to support you going forward. As Mark hit on, talk to your staff. We are here to help. So you've had a lot of information presented to you. Let you absorb that. And you can follow up with us individually if you have questions. Just know that. So thank you, and I hope you have a good evening.
All righty, and final item on the agenda is number 6, which is report of actions for the Yuba City Planning Commission and Sutter County update. A on that is the Yuba City Planning Commission, which I don't think we have anybody that's assigned to the Sutter County Planning Commission. And B would be the Sutter County liaison over to here, and Mr. Campbell is not here tonight either. So I think with that, we can adjourn the meeting.